Welcome to my nightmare.
Bonjour à tous. And yes, there is another movie review today. Yes. I see that you guys enjoyed the substance, even though YouTube pretty much done halted it, and probably what's going to happen with this video as well. But I'm glad you guys enjoyed it and got the message. So, we're going to do another review, and this time it's for the film entitled Sinners. And before I begin, I'm going to read my exchange between me and Creole Bella. And then I'm going to go into my full review. Because I was texting her the whole time, the whole duration of the film, mostly. So yeah, let me scrolly. I'm probably going to edit this part out. So I hit up my girl Creole Bella and I was telling her, I'm going to watch Sinners tonight. Shit better be good. And I put the eye rolling or not impressed emoji. And she said her and her husband watched Sinners, but she said I'm keeping my mouth shut because I'll ruin it. And then I said that the Asian guy is cute in this. Black men were crazy about that mixed chick until they found out she was with a white man. And then she says he is very handsome, the Asian guy that is. And she said, yep, ruined their little fantasy and I love it. And I was telling her I want to put him on that counter. And then I said, this sex scene. And she's like, girl, I know. I think I looked away or went on my phone during that part. She says, icky. And then she says, natives? That's when I said, natives? And she said her and her husband had a lot to say about the natives' appearance in this film. And then I said, I like to hear it. They are always warning people and no one ever believes them. Fuck southern white folks. And she said, yep. And people still don't listen to the wisdom and warnings of natives. And I talked about the mixed chick, and I'm just gonna scroll past that part. And then I said, ugh, this pussy eating scene. Come on now. And she says, that was, not good. I said, cringe as fuck. And she says, he was trying too hard. He needed to sit his little ass down and just keep playing that music. And then I said, exactly. Okay, the vampires performing is sending me. And she said a little river dance / Irish jig was pretty cheesy and would have been better in a comedy. It had so much potential but left too much meat on the bone. And then I said, yep, that's how I feel. It's like Ryan doesn't know if the movie is horror or a comedy. Horror. And a black woman, a sluts in there shaking my damn head, lol. And I was like, yeah, I'm seeing too many flaws with this movie. That make me want to watch From Dusk to Dawn. And then she says, I notice how all the brown skinned black women are portrayed as sexual. Her husband was saying they got the concept of this film From Dusk to Dawn and another film. He was not impressed. I feel like they could have gone deeper with the natives and the hoodoo, but they totally missed the mark. So I asked her, what other movie reminds you of? I'm thinking about doing a review, which I'm doing right now. And she said her husband said it kept telling me that it was Idlewild meets From Dusk to Dawn. I said, oh, it sure is. And she says, I had big expectations for this one, but it fell short in a lot of ways. And I said, yeah, I'm ready for it to be over. They definitely tricked us with the trailer. She said, I checked out at the end and didn't really care anymore. Didn't show me anything. I really tried to like it. And I said, what's taking this vampire so long to die? And I said, yeah, I've been checking out, just killing time. She said, it's a movie. You just kind of play in the back while you doing stuff around the house. She said, girl, I'm dying over here. She said, so many cheesy and cringe parts. I've just never been a fan of Michael B. Jordan. It's just something about him that triggers me. Typical black man bullshit I can't stand. I love acting and have studied acting for years, even though I no longer act. But I just don't get the hype of him. And I try to like him, but he just doesn't do it for me. Now, Chadwick Boseman was a freaking actor and could kill in the role. I said, he's overrated and a cornball. I love Chadwick Boseman. They said his image is in the movie, but I didn't see it. The ending would have been better if the Klan showed up at night and got killed. And she says, yeah, they should have murdered the Klan. And she said, I didn't see it either. and I said, I'm going to make a review of it. I told my brother an Asian version of this movie would have been better. And she asked, did your brother watch it? And I said, no. He said he had no interest in it. I told him about how they did our tribe, Choctaw, in it. By the way, did you have anything to add to my review? I am working on a rough draft right now. She said, I like the thicker black lady that did the hoodoo, and I wish they would dove deeper into the hoodoo practices. I noticed the theme of Asians profiting off of blacks, i.e. their store in a black town, but when shit hit the fan, the Asian lady was ready to jump ship and open the door and expose everyone to vampires. At the same time, the Asians don't owe blacks anything, and she was concerned about her husband, even though he had been turned by vampires. It shows two black women, one that is white passing and another that is brown skinned, that are both married and obviously unhappy in their marriages. They both have sexual encounters at the juke joint. Also, the hoodoo lady has a sex scene that can perpetuate the stigma of black women being sexual heathens and always down for whatever sexually. And I said, love what I'm reading so far. And then she says, and also something that was brought to my attention by a customer of Irish descent recently is how they claim they had it worse than black slaves. I kind of picked up on that theme with the Irish vampire in this. I didn't realize how many Irish people have chips on their shoulders because of their treatment here in the U.S. and the constant comparisons to the black slavery experience. I had a customer about 6 or 7 months ago tell me that he told some of his black friends that the Irish had it worse than black slaves, and I said they were indentured servants, and I said they have not had it that hard because they became white and even joined the KKK. And yep, that was my review with her, and I'm going to carry on with my review. So, alright you guys, I'm here with my review finally, and let's get started. So yeah, I went into the movie without expectations. I had prepared some food, plugged up my speakers, and I'm like, yay, we about to get into this. And I remember folks were saying that it was similar to Robert Johnson, and I think somebody on X or Twitter was like, it reminded them of another guy named Johnson, or somebody with a similar story. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. But a lot of people pretty much said it reminded them of Robert Johnson. I got a little bit, but not that much from this film. And I have to say that Michael B. Jordan was a sight with that grill in his mouth. But I guess because he has like big teeth and he has like a big mouth, the grill, it just looked weird. I wasn't feeling that at all. And so yeah, it was like it started with the young guy who he came in with like a broken guitar handle, and he comes into his dad's like church, and while he was preaching, he was telling him about something. Basically, this beginning was just the ending. Like I've noticed that I hadn't seen nothing like that in like a while. They used to do that a lot back in those movies in like the 80s, and I think the 70s too. They would show like the ending at the beginning. And like I said, I had a lot of expectations with this movie, and I was like, I want to enjoy it. I mean, everybody was talking about it and shit, but well, yeah. So I'm never gonna really go through everything about the movie. I'm just gonna go through this and that about it. Let me talk about the Asian representation. Like Creole Bella said in the text message, she said that the Asian couple had their own business in the black community. And I think when I watched a little small documentary about it, it was had this elderly Asian lady was talking about she wasn't sure, about how she fit in between the blacks and the whites because they were other. And like I said, the guy in the movie, oh my god, he was so fine. His name is Yao or something. Yao? Oh my goodness, Yao. He was so fine. The chick was cute too, by the way. They own like a store in the middle of a black community, I guess. And let me say this. I was watching somebody's video. I'm not gonna say who it is. One of my pet peeves I have with Asians, I'm talking about the beige Asians. I'm not talking about the other Asians. I know they got different representations of Asian. I'm talking about the beige Asians, like East Asian and stuff, and Southeast Asian. You gotta be careful with trying to prop up any kind of representation that you see in movies. not all representations is good representations, because this movie gave a bad representation of Asians. Like, it wasn't a good representation at all. And I saw one guy, he was like very, very excited. Oh, they mentioned the Asians, they were in Mississippi and they were of Toys on descent or something he was saying. And like I said, if you want to get representation, you're gonna have to do it yourself, because you can't, like, sometimes when they make black movies and they'll have an Asian person, they'll be like, oh, look, and I'm like, it's no big deal. And quite frankly, the Asians got killed off in this movie, so where's the representation there? Like, you got killed off, just like in every single horror movie that they have. They'll feature an Asian person. They usually like the first or middle person to get killed off. Like, they never survive. I was surprised when I watched Until Dawn, the Asian girl survived. they hinted at the end that she might have not made it, but she was actually like locked up in like a electric chair. And I don't mean to spoil that movie, but I was just happy to see her survive. Like, and you usually don't see Asians surviving in horror movies. I think the last time I saw an Asian person that survived in a horror movie was Silent Night with, what's her name? I'm watching this movie right now, so let me get her name right quick. She's right there on the screen. Crap. Let me get her name. I just got her name. Her name is Jamie King. I had to look it up. But yeah, it was a movie with her where she was playing like a cop, and there was like a killer Santa Claus, and she had like an Asian girl, pretty chick, by the way. I think she was Kerm, which is Cambodian, and she was like a secretary or something like that. I thought she was gonna be a goner in that movie, but she surprisingly survived, and that was like back in 2012, I believe. She actually survived in that. But yeah, my point is, like, don't get so excited when you see your image in some of these movies, because not all good representation is good representation. Only you can control your image, and this wasn't a good image, in my opinion, of Asians, because it made y'all look like it didn't look good at all, in my opinion. And I noticed that, speaking of Asian, there was like a dance scene where they, in the juke joint, they were jumping from decade to decade. I guess they trying to imply that people are stealing our culture, our music, and culture vultures and stuff. They had like the Chinese opera dancer and the Monkey King and stuff. I'm like, what is going on here? Don't get me wrong, I love the Chinese opera dance. I really do. The makeup, the hair, because it reminded me of Iron Monkey too with Donnie Yen. I think he dressed up like that, and I haven't seen it in a while, and I think he dressed up in something like an opera dancer. He looks good in makeup, period, because he's just a beautiful man. Anyway, let me keep going. So they show this one scene where this white guy was fleeing from, or apparently, we already know who they are, the Native Americans. They were on horses chasing this white guy down, and he goes to like this house, and he's knocking, and they let him in, and one of the native guys on the horse was like, "You don't know who you just let in." And first they asked him, were they aware of a man that came through? And she held on like a shotgun, and she was like, yeah, what about him, or whatever. I'm not going back to watch this movie, so if you can go watch it yourself. I'm just paraphrasing or whatever, summarizing, give me a gist of it. So yeah, so he was like, well, have a good day, ma'am. And that was the last time you ever saw them. And they apparently were the Choctaw natives, and as you know, I'm half Choctaw. I'm like, okay, well, what the hell is going on here? I mean, Creole Bella said in the text, she was like, they could have had a bigger presence in there. And you talking about representation? I wanted better representation of them in this movie. Like, what the hell? Because, like she said, and like I told her, I was like, they always warning people and nobody believes them. I was like, well, fuck them white folks shit. Like, damn. I said, shit, okay, well, you don't want to listen, shit, I'm taking my talents and going to South Beach somewhere. Like, I ain't got time for this crap. You want to get bit the fuck up, guess what, it ain't gonna be me. So anyway, I missed the part where Stack referred to the black woman in the joint as like field bitches when he was talking to the white passing chick. I'm guessing her name was Mary, and she was kind of crass herself in the movie, with the thing she was talking about, trying to talk hood and shit, and it seemed forced and contrived. She was like, you put your tongue in my cooch. And I'm like, this movie had vulgarities in it that wasn't really necessary. It really didn't need that. And them people weren't talking like that back then in the 30s. You look at any film footage from back then, or even talk to people who were alive back then, people whose parents were alive back then, they'll tell you they weren't talking like that back then. Like, that's crazy. I'll be able to bitch ass up in here. I'm like, oh God, cut, stop. What the church say nowadays, stop the cap. So the vampires in this, to me, it was hinting that Christians are bloodsuckers. The vampires looked more like demons than vampires, because I know people have their own interpretation of how they view vampires, but these vampires look very, very demonic, you know, their eyes especially, because if you watch like movies about Satanism or demonology, demonic possessions, you know there's a resemblance between these vampires and, you know, somebody being possessed or something like that with their eyes. And that's just what I think. And as for Christians being bloodsuckers, well, any religion has bloodsuckers in it, but I guess I guess for this movie, you know, the Christians were. And my favorite character out of everyone was the plus size black woman. I can't remember her name. She was the one that practiced voodoo, and she was the one that was very, very sound minded, but I just didn't like the sex scene between her and Michael B. Jordan's character, and how they were, you know, he was having sex with her from behind, meaning I don't respect you enough to look you in the eye with, you know, direct contact, you know, with love and passion to fuck you, but I'm just gonna hit from the back or whatever. It's like yeah, but she was like my favorite character. I really wanted her to survive, and of course, you know, she didn't. And I said that I noticed that this vampire movie had no priests, no crosses. This was just something you typically see up in vampire movies, just a priest. I mean, they had a preacher, but he wasn't involved in what was really going on in this scene. No crosses. I didn't see no cross, no crucifix, no nothing in this. Like, wow. And I also noticed, why didn't they put a black woman with a white man couple in this? I don't know if anybody picked up on that, but yeah, I most certainly did. Or put a black woman with an Asian guy, because besides, they could have found another hot Chinese guy and put him with a black woman, have a black family, you know, blazing children. Like, come on now. Because they were getting together back then when they first, you know, migrated to Mississippi. They had a lot of black / Asian families back. You know what? Let's keep it moving. So, yeah, just like what my friend's husband said, it reminded him of like From Dusk to Dawn and Idlewild. It did too, you know, when I saw the vampires and they were, you know, coming to a like a party or whatever, you know, just like From Dusk Till Dawn. But From Dusk to Dawn is the GOAT, one of the GOAT vampires movies. And I saw someone mention Night of the Living Dead, the Night of the Living Dead ending, which I guess they're talking about the old one, the one in black and white. I didn't like the ending to that one because of the fact that they shot that guy because he was black, not because he was a zombie. And so, yeah. So, the ending where Stack and Mary roll into the bar where Sammy, as an elderly man, is, they were looking like New Jack Swing or some form of the early 90s. Why was Mary sucking on a lollipop? I thought vampires couldn't taste food. The only food they can taste is blood. Unless the lollipop was made out of blood, but I highly doubt it. But anything, I guess, with this movie. So, the best part is the ending where Smoke goes Rambo. But too bad black men aren't going to do anything like that in real life to check white supremacy. We already know that. I mean, look at how they reacting to Hulk Hogan passing. I'm going to just leave that one alone. And yeah, this movie was very overrated. I did not care for it. And yeah, I didn't like it, and I told other people about it. And black folks obsessively love and hate relationship with non-black people is why the ratings are so high. And you can interpret it any way you want to. But I'm going to read some international movie database reviews. And before I get to that, I'm going to tell you guys I've heard so many claiming that the high reviews are probably from bots and even psyops. I'm gonna tell you guys some vampire movies I actually like. From Dusk to Dawn, obviously. John Carpenter's Vamp from 1986. Fright Night 1 and 2. Interview with the Vampire, Blackula, Bram Stoker's Dracula 1992, 33 Days of Night, and Vampire in Brooklyn. What are your favorites? And my Asian version of this, I would say I would have different people. In my Asian version of this, I would have Andy On is like the Stack and the other character, Smoke, his character, Stack and Smoke. Because I think he would have definitely pulled off something like that. And of course, I would have like Donnie Yen as like the preacher, but he would actually get a very bigger part in this than what the guy's father, who was a preacher, was in this film. He'd have to come along and sense that his son was in danger, and he'd go and try and save everyone if he could. Of course, there'll be casualties, of course. It's a vampire movie. It'd have like action and kung fu. I think it'd be really, really good. It'll be like this movie I saw years ago. I think it's called Twin Effect. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the chat. I don't feel like looking up right now. But yeah, it'd be like a kung fu vampire. Not too much wire work or nothing. It'll be like ground based, like it'd be something else. That would be like my version of it. What do you guys think? Look at the screen and tell me what you guys think. So now we're going to get into the International Movie Database reviews. It's going to be long, so if you don't want to hear this part, feel free to click off and head straight to the comment section. Like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you guys in the next video. But for now, I'm going to get to the movie reviews. First one says, the movie kind of wants to be scary, but the enemies in the film feel like a complete joke. From the first scene they are shown, and it takes away all the tension. It wants to be action-packed and explosive, but the fight scenes are kind of boring and left me wanting to move on to more serious scenes again. Even though those serious scenes are kind of a slow burn, the film wants to be funny, and even though it made me chuckle a bit, it never really took it far enough to justify sacrificing the big threat in the film for laughs. This movie is too boring and slow to be an entertaining action comedy, and doesn't take the humor and fight scenes far enough to really have an impact. At the same time, this movie is far too ridiculous to be a serious, scary, and emotional movie that reaches you on any kind of emotional level. I would have liked it if they would have sacrificed the humor for building a serious threat that feels genuinely scary and terrifying. In addition to my previous criticisms, I spotted some typical cliches in the dialogue, writing that made me roll my eyes, and there were some moments where I found it extremely hard to believe that certain characters survived. Exactly. Another one says, I can't remember the last time when a movie was so hyped to the point that I dropped all my plans and blindly bought a cinema ticket for something I wasn't even planning on watching. From the reviews online, I thought this would be some unbelievable work of art that breaks the mold of storytelling while revolutionizing the horror genre with filming techniques that humans have never seen before. Well, it was far from that. Contrary to that, the comedy constantly broke the serious atmosphere that the story tried to establish. Finally, when the vampires finally appeared, it sort of destroyed everything that was built in the interesting first half. Moreover, the pivotal sequence in Act 3 was head-scratchingly stupid, and the villains often went from menacing monsters to comedic parodies. Yep, that was one of my issues with it. Next one says, the big issue is that Sinners presents itself as a vampire film, but for most of its runtime, it seems to forget that. Yep. Another one said, thank you for adding multiple unnecessary romance plots that had no payoff, no purpose in the story. Yep, that's true. Another one says, the real sinners are paid critics rating this sky high. It feels like the sinners was directed by two different Kuglers, one responsible for the first half and another the second. If I had to rate them separately, the first half is a solid 8. Yeah, the second a disappointing 4. The vampires were atrocious and weak and didn't even add anything new. Seen it all before and done far better. After watching it and reading other people's reviews, I couldn't believe how so many people liked it, and so people have given the tripe 10s and 9s and calling it a masterpiece. If people think this is a masterpiece, then the movie industry is finished and in a terrible state. Exactly. Instead, this is another one. Instead, vampires dance an Irish jig that caused the person I was watching the movie with to lean over and say to me, "This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen." Another one says, "As for the negatives, the biggest problem I had is that the film accomplished nothing. It finished and I was like, okay, what am I to make of this?" Exactly. Another one, "They touch a lot of themes I can't even remember, but never expand on any of them. It feels like it tries to be a lot of things, but ends up being none, going all over the place. I kind of lost interest very early. By the way, I was baffled by Michael B. Jordan having a faded haircut. I wouldn't buy him being a guy from the 2000s, let alone 1932. And his disconnected goatee. How careless of him and the director." Okay, another one says, "The music is very effective at times. That was the only thing I really liked about the movie was the music and the dance scene with I like the Chinese opera dancer. And others just distracting and goofy. One particular sequence that people seem to be salivating over involves the imagery of black music and its influence on culture over the years, and it includes a George Clinton stand-in that kind of looks like Macho Man Randy in blackface. Although an imaginative sequence within the context of the film is just cringy and indulgent. Speaking of indulgent, there is no way this movie needs to be 2.5 hours long. It is nice to see a somewhat original film put up some numbers, but by original, I simply mean not a remake or superhero movie or some existing IP. This film is original in that regard, but hardly original in the inspiration and sources it crips from. Most notably, Tarantino, Dusk Till Dawn, Django, even shades of Inglourious Basterds. I can imagine if I were an aspiring black artist, I would love this film, and I feel that it were made for me, and I suspect its success, both critical and audience wise, is very contingent on the fact that it's a black story. However, that doesn't automatically make it great. If this were the same movie but starring white people, it would hardly be doing this kind of business. True. Another one says, "It's like watching several movies at once while on hallucinogens." If only the movie focused on the action / thriller / vampire plots. Did I watch a musical? Did I watch a period movie with socio-political intonations? Did I watch a vampire flick? It was really confusing, but not at all in a good way. The whole thing felt like a fever dream. Lord. And there was even a point when I stared at my fiance and mouthed, "I'm sorry," when I saw her face twisted in a "what the fuck did you make me watch" expression. Another one says, "After seeing the high scores on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, I decided to go to the cinema and watch this movie. Unfortunately, I left the cinema feeling completely disappointed and annoyed. Same here. This has got to be, hands down, the dumbest script written in the past 5 years. Why is it so stupid? Well, because of the following. 1, nothing happened for at least hour and a half. Like absolutely nothing. They are just walking around and talking to people. None of the interactions matter. 2, the love scenes. The love-making scenes are really uncomfortable to watch. There were 3 of them. The first takes you by surprise, where the main character doggy styles his ex in broad daylight right in the middle of her shop, where only a second ago she had kids as customers. Yes, to all this. That was crazy. In the second one, Another main character goes down. The lady, he was like, even though she says, I need to freshen up, I have been sweating all day. His response, I want to taste you. Ooh. Ew. In the last love scene, the girl drools and spits in the main character's mouth, and he loves it. I remember that. That was disgusting. And speaking of her, I think she said she was uncomfortable with that scene. I was like, ma'am, you didn't even show your tits. What the fuck are you talking about? You just riding on top of old boy. Did he make you uncomfortable? Like, and like we were saying in the text, but I was like, I didn't even mention that, but I mentioned the text. I was like, these mixed girls that don't like these damn dudes. And I think she had like, if she was in an interview with some other dude for like the Spider-Man, and he was like interested in her, she made some kind of face or something. I'm like, she's obviously not interested in black dudes, and it's very, very obvious. So that's probably what that's all about. I'm pretty sure if she did a scene like that with a white man, she probably wouldn't have complained, but who knows? I don't know nothing about Haley. But let's continue. 3. The first vampire shows up after an hour or so. He is flying in broad daylight and only has mild burns. He takes refuge in the home of unsuspecting victims. When his chasers, some Native Americans, they were Choctaws, come along, they quickly decide that night is falling and they needed to head home. For real? So they have been chasing him all day. He is the last remaining vampire, and instead of preventing the spread, they go home for supper? What? 4. The vampires are absolutely covered in blood when they attack, yet they are clean as a whistle every single time they interact with our main characters. No blood on their faces or on their clothing. Nothing, not even a drop. 5. One of the main characters is a musical wizard. Suddenly musicians and dancers from all cultures and timelines show up and start singing and jamming. Nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. 6. The vampires are pretty much singing and dancing like 50% of on their own screen time. 7. One vampire has been invited into the club already and the other has been killed inside, yet neither is willing or able to enter again. Maybe they forgot they could come inside again. Actually, according to vampire lore, they have to get permission to enter, so that explains why they can't go back in. Yeah, they can't just go in. Yeah, might want to do your research. So 8. Once all the vampires are invited in by the angry Asian lady, they attack one by one, like in the good old-fashioned kung fu movies. Hundreds of vampires are pretty much standing around waiting till one is killed before the other moves in. 9. The vampire bite a lot, yet the victim's wounds each time appear to be small wounds. 10. Our main hero literally comes out of the blue to impale the boss vampire. Like, one scene he is inside the burning barn, the next scene he has somehow avoided hundreds of vampires and ended up right behind the boss with a wooden stake in his hand. In the meanwhile, all other vampires are just standing there watching. 11. All vampires are just standing around waiting for the sun to rise. They all burn to a crisp in seconds. 12. The vampire that was able to fly in broad daylight turns into a blazing fire when the first ray of sun touches him, even though he is standing up to his belly in water. Yeah, he like swirled up in the air like some shit you see in anime or something like that. It's like that part was like weird. 13. For no reason whatsoever, the KKK shows up at the barn. Even though it was on fire just 1 second ago, it is in perfect conditions now. Also, no ash or charred bodies outside. Everything is clean as a whistle. Well, the head vampire did warn them in the film when he showed up that the KKK was showing up and that those two that was with him were, KKK Klansmen. So, yeah. 14, it ends with a post-credit scene where it appears 2 vampires survive because they escape. Like, how can hundreds of vampires be burned to a crisp by the first ray of sun and these 2 can escape even though they are in the middle of nowhere? Well, he pretty much said at the end of the film that he told Mary to just go vamonos, disappear somewhere, and that's why they survived. Yeah. 15. The main character shoots 2 guys in broad daylight in the middle of a busy street. He talks to them. Then he proceeds to do his grocery. Nobody panics. Nobody calls. Nobody calls the police. The bystanders simply start whispering racial slurs. Oh God. 16. In the final and only battle, even though the vampires greatly outnumber their victims, 5 living at least 100 vampires, they suddenly retreat because reasons. I could go on and on about how poorly written and executed this movie was, but I will stop at this point. I only get angry thinking about wasting my time and money on this terrible movie. Well, I didn't waste no money. I wasted time on it. But yeah. The next one says, The Legend, Let the Right One In, From Dusk to Dawn, and Rambo, all mashed together into one film, and the result is a complete disaster. I can't remember the last time I watched something so painfully unoriginal and mind-numbingly dumb. The plot makes no sense, jumping from one absurd situation to another with zero logic or coherence. The dialogue is laughably bad, filled with cliches and lines that feel like they were written by a teenager trying to sound edgy. True. The acting doesn't help either. It ranges from flat and emotionless to completely over the top. I seriously don't understand how this movie has an average rating of 8. It's one of those films that tries to be everything at once. Action, horror, thriller, but ends up being none of them. Just a pointless, chaotic mess. Save yourself the time and skip this one. Avoid it like the plague. Another one says, the kills were so average with little to no gore, with vampires leaping onto victims and chopping away on their necks with their backs to the camera. Yawn. And not enough kills for a vampire film. True, that's true. Why would you tell everyone to leave the club knowing full well there are vampires outside? No budget for extra kills? Laziness? Some good blues music. This is another one. But that's all that's good about this movie. There's so much that isn't explained or falls short of what it could have been. The musical connection between the vampires and non-vampires is interesting. I get it. A generational musical talent pops up on the vampire radio and they want him so he can play with them forever. Okay, not the greatest concept, but pretty decent. But why? How did this start and evolve? Nothing. Why were the vampires Irish? What's the importance of the Irish dancing other than the vampires are Irish? Nothing. The entire first hour was slow moving. The character development was weak, with the exception of Sammy. That's the young fella's name, Sammy. The next 30 minutes are okay. They start to set up the confrontation, but still too slow. All of the cliche vampire movie stuff starts happening. They ask to come in. Someone knows how to stop them. People telling the others to kill them if they get bitten, blah, blah, blah. Now you get the female vampire who bites Stack, and then she runs out of the building. He turns, and then he runs out of the building. Huh? When the ground vampires are inside, it seems to be an even match somehow. None of the vampires are using any special vampire skills. In fact, these vampires are the worst fighters out there. They're still able to kill many people, and then they run out of the building again. Huh? Now they have to regroup when they come back in. All but one person has conveniently made it upstairs. You already know that Sammy and Smoke are going to make it out, but when Stack goes to bite his brother, he apparently stops because he smells the garlic the smoke ate. You mean that smoke ate? Nobody else had a problem biting garlic eaters, huh? True. The entire last part with the KKK showing up the next morning when the party would clearly have been over makes no sense. It has nothing to do with the story. It adds nothing to the movie beyond getting to kill some white folks. What about the scene where all the vampires are outside by the pond? The head vampire gets hit with a special guitar and all of them become disoriented. In fact, they're so disoriented that they all stand around while the sun starts to rise and then they all burn up. Not one of them attempt to retreat inside, not one, other than Mary, which we'll find out at the end. The ending when the vamp shows up and meets Sammy 60 years later is just dumb. So 60 years later they show up and ask him if he wants to be turned while he basically a dying old man. Sure. If he didn't want to be a vampire at 20, you think he wants to be a vampire at 80? Come on, really? Michael B. Jordan is a horrible actor. Playing 2 parts? Double the cringeworthy performance. He has no range in his expressions or variations of I'm so serious. Look at the mean look I have on my face. The previews of this movie were fairly misleading. Yep, I said that earlier. They could have really dug into the voodoo and black magic side of this, but instead we got Irish vampires with no backstory other than someone taking their land some time ago. Nice. Another one says, there were also some obvious newbie mistakes. For example, there's a scene with the twins standing next to each other, but one of their shadows was super long and the other was short. It was clear that those parts were filmed at different times of the day. The director didn't seem to care about these details. Another one says, tonally, the movie can't decide what it wants to be. It starts off as a gritty drama, shifts into a heist thriller, then tries to morph into supernatural horror complete with a vampire villain who's barely explained and about as scary as a Halloween store prop. Another one says, I'm almost done, you guys. Why did a character slice his arms open to attract vampires that were already coming for him? Why did he act so stupidly along with the girl when it came to the garlic eating scene? Yeah, that part, she made a big deal about the garlic. That was really stupid. I agree with you. 3 more, you guys. So, another one says, major spoilers. Half, when Smoke ambushes and kills Hogwood and the clan, the next morning he pulled out his World War I locker with weapons and ammunition to kill the clan. My reaction seeing that scene was, where was that locker when they needed it to fight the vampires? Oh. It wouldn't have worked anyway because of the fact that, unless he had silver bullets, it wouldn't have worked on the vampires. Again, it would have made sense in the story if the vampire trio had turned Hogwood and the clan into vampires, making the scene of the surviving humans fight off 2 types of evil. That's a good one too. I really like that one. Somebody needs to explore that when they make another film like that. They want to, go into the political horror, have racist vampires and shit like that. That would be very, very interesting. So, here's another one. Special effects rating 0.1 out of 10. Costumes. The action takes place only 100 years ago. Lots of photos, descriptions, even real costumes taken and used. However, the heroine, Haley's dress, is made of stretched material like the other female characters in the club. Why? Because the director likes the actresses' butts, and he stubbornly points the camera at their butts so that thongs, Carls in the 30s are visible under the. I noticed that too. When Haley turned around, you can visibly see her thong underwear. Like, the fuck? They weren't wearing thongs in the 30s. That happened about I would say about 40 years later, back in the late 70s and shit, when they really started wearing thongs. And that's, yeah. I want to do your research. And lastly, am I the only reviewer that knows that an obvious attempt to disprove the myth that black men don't perform colorness? These references were riddled throughout the movie awkwardly, and for no reason, it felt as though Coogler swerved out of his way to include them. Now, for what I heard, I'm not gonna go there. So yeah. Anyway, you guys, that's their review of the film as well as mine on Creole Bella, and like I said, I do not recommend this film, and I don't ever want to see it again ever. Unless it's on as background noise on TV, which would more likely would happen. So yeah, tell me what you guys think of this film. Like I said earlier before I read the reviews, leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe. If you enjoy the content, feel free to donate, keeps it going. But anyway, I'm going to talk to you guys in the next one. Au revoir.